Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we're going to be talking about Karen Swallow Prior again, but this time we're going to be talking about her flaccid, very inept, and subversive pro-life position. I would actually call it a pro-abortion light position because that's really what it is. That's really what it is. Those who are not with us are against us. Those who are not against us are with us, and she's not with us. And she's certainly casting stones and punching to the right, which is what Karen Swallow Prior exists to do because she is a feminist leftist that is allowed and white knighted to persist in the church. But we do have a very unusual circumstance. We're going to be talking about that today, in that she got ratioed on Twitter. And if you know anything about Karen Swallow Prior, she lives on the Twitter sphere. She lives on Twitter. Twitter is her life. And for her to get ratioed on Twitter is lethal. It's very rare. And the fact is, this is someone who basically punches right on abortion. This is someone who basically subverts the church, subverts the pro-life movement, and then is at the center of a conspiracy to blackmail Tom Buck. And yet, it's very rare for her to get ratioed because there are so many cucks and simps who white knight for her, and it's embarrassing, bros. These people are an embarrassment. If you're white knighting for Karen Swallow Prior, you are an embarrassment as a man. Just a fact. So, after the leaked draft of the majority opinion written by Samuel Alito, man, I'm just buffing these names. Samuel Alito wrote the based rough draft of the majority opinion, and it is based. I like it a lot. It takes a mocking tone towards Roe. It just eviscerates it. And Karen Swallow Prior is trying to take credit for it, even though that she basically didn't support any of the processes that would have actually led to this decision. She actually opposed this every step along the way, as far as I can tell. And we're going to go through some of the receipts of the claims that I just made. On May 2nd, she tweeted, "Called it, abortion will be considered unthinkable 50 years from now." And then Brian Welch, who I guess is man, he's taking credit for it. It's in his bio right here. Original James Merritt certified small guy pastor, causing SBC elite leftists to say the quiet parts out loud, such as Karen Swallow Prior. So this troll for Jesus, because trolling is biblical. That's another video. With 25 followers, and I imagine he gained a few followers because of this, got her to respond and say the quiet part out loud. Bro, Brian Welch, you are the MVP of this story. Congratulations. Other than Samuel Alito. Yep, I was for the slow, right way of doing things. That's why I said 50 years. I'm not big on shortcuts. So let's... again, there are so many ways to attack this. I like, is this a shortcut? It already has taken 50 years. It's plainly obvious how, first of all, there's only one way to end abortion, and that is to criminalize it, or to greatly diminish abortion. Obviously, even if something's criminalized, it still occurs, but we're not going to be seeing hundreds of thousands of abortions if it's criminalized. We're not going to be seeing those numbers. We're not. That's not how human nature works. Abortion is about convenience. The more convenient it is, the higher the abortion rate is. And it is very convenient now. And Karen Swallow Prior writes this article for Vox. If you're not familiar with Vox, Vox is the NBC-owned, I believe they're NBC Universal-owned, mainstream leftist media. So very liberal. And she obviously can write for very liberal sources because she's one of them. And her article is Abortion Will Be Considered Unthinkable 50 Years From Now. And it calls itself The Moral Case Against Abortion. This was written in 2019. I believe it was right before the Vox adpocalypse. So, to summarize this article, it is the most humanist article on the abortion issue that supposedly wants to fight abortion that I've ever read. It is entirely humanist. It is all about us making progress as a species. That is really what this article is all about. I mean, you just see the way it begins. The list of those who had few or no legal rights throughout history is staggering. Women, children, orphans, widows, Jews, gays and lesbians, slaves, former slaves, descendants of slaves, those with leprosy, undocumented immigrants, so illegal aliens, to name a few. Nothing marks the progress of any society more than the expansion of human rights to those who formerly lacked them. I believe that such progress is to continue. Prenatal human beings will be included in this group, and we will consider elective abortion primitive and cruel in the future. That is a very humanist argument. Notice she said just primitive and cruel rather than murder. We'll talk about how she views the language on abortion shortly. I got those receipts pulled up as well, as she is the worst pro-life activist in the history of this movement. She is the worst. Absolutely top 5 worst. So there's also a flawed premise in this article, and that is that abortion will become unthinkable 50 years from now because she's citing a declining abortion rate. Now, much of our abortion data comes from the Guttmacher Institute, which is where she gets a lot of her data from. If you hover over the links, a lot of this data comes from the Guttmacher Institute, which is a pro-abortion firm. And man, where is it? There's a myth here that nearly 1 in 4 women has an abortion by age 45. That's a myth, because that calculates the number of abortions versus the number of women, and it uses a mathematical formula and discounts the fact that a lot of people who have abortions are repeat offenders, borderline serial killers. Because I believe the textbook definition of a serial killer is the fact that you need to have 3 murders under your belt with a resting period in between each murder, so it's not a spree. If you have like one abortion that was twins, and then a second abortion, you might not be a serial killer by definition. But there are serial killers out there that puff up the numbers, that raise the average for everyone. So that is a very misleading statistic. That's why it sounds unbelievably high. And the other thing that's very flawed in her assessment of the data is the fact that I don't believe that certain methods of abortion that go through the abortion system are actually counted in this number. So obviously your surgery abortions would be counted in this number, I would imagine. Unless they're committed illegally. Then they might not be counted in this number. So, but abortion pills that are prescribed by like the abortionist, and I'm not talking about the over-the-counter stuff that you can get, but the abortion pills that like a Planned Parenthood might give you via telehealth or whatever, those things are not counted in these numbers. If anything that you have to take home, that you get to, you go home with this pill that'll kill your child, that'll help you murder your child. You go home and you take that. That might not be counted in the abortion numbers. So there's an entire swath of missing numbers in how we calculate the abortion rate in this country. So it really goes to show, obviously, in this article, she talks about the declining rate of abortion and credits all these things, but I do not believe that she actually credits stringent laws. Where does she say that in this article? What Whatever the cause, however, abortion is becoming less necessary and less desirable. Recent attempts in several states to expand access to late-term abortions in anticipation of the possible overturning of Roe not only violate the view of the majority who support greater restrictions after the first trimester, but will be seen as a what is it? Where is this part? So, and she's basically comparing abortion to smoking. That's how she ends. When we do, we will look back on elective abortion and wonder, as we do now with polluting and smoking, why we so wholeheartedly embraced it. And again, it never really states that abortion is murder. It just states that it's life, but doesn't actually connect the dots to actually make a really coherent argument. Maybe it's in the other article. So let's talk about that other article. This is a screenshotted article that she wrote for Christianity Today in their hermeneutics portion or feature. I don't know. This is from 2015. And this is when she was working for the ERLC. And again, she was a terrible pro-life activist then. Let's see. She starts off with the... let's see. She talks about some dude who shot up an abortion clinic, which to me sounds like vigilantism. Let's just be honest. Because the government won't... that kind of like the Wild West or whatever. If the government won't put down murders and, people will take the law into their own hands. That's just a reality. So, let's see. Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper said that the shooting might have been caused by inflammatory rhetoric we see on all levels. He called for those debating abortion to tone down the rhetoric. The CEO of Planned Parenthood in the Rocky Mountains claims that extremists are creating poisonous environment that feeds domestic terrorism in this country. From opposite sides, again, vigilantism, not domestic terrorism, there's a difference. From opposite sides of the political spectrum, presidential candidates Ben Carson and Bernie Sanders cast some blame for the shooting on bitter rhetoric and hateful speech, respectively. It would be easy to dismiss such charges. Words are not deeds, after all, but in fact, no one more than Christians should recognize the power of the words to bring good or ill. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruits. Proverbs 18:21. An earlier passage in Proverbs tells us the words of reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And that's Proverbs 12:18. Calling abortion what it is will bring good. Doing so without temperance of love will bring harm. So this is where it gets really bad. Rallying for the defunding of Planned Parenthood isn't inflammatory rhetoric, it's political engagement. Videos depicting the self-damning words and actions of Planned Parenthood officials isn't yellow journalism, it's investigative reporting, which is not what Julie Roys does, by the way. On the other hand, referring to abortion providers as abortion ghouls, clinic volunteers and workers as death squirts or blood workers, and women who obtain abortions as murderers is worse than inflammatory. It's unchristlike. Calling legal abortion murder when it isn't, it is, to our shame, lawful, is to say what isn't true, or at least in a civil, not church context. Okay, again, calling murder is Christ-like. Calling abortion ghouls what they are is Christ-like. Calling death squirts and blood workers what they are is Christ-like. And calling women who obtain abortions murderers is Christ-like. That is the sin that they are committing. That is what that sin makes you. And that's why you need to repent of it. It's murder. Do we believe it's murder or not? If we believe it's murder, it should be laced in our rhetoric. We need to push the Overton window to call it murder, to call people who get abortions murderers, and to call people who give abortions murderers. This is clear Rhetoric 101 in terms of shifting the Overton window in our favor, and Karen Swallow Pryor is trying to call it unchristlike because it's too much truth and it hurts her feminist feelings. The purpose of language, it's God-given raison d'etre. I don't know that word. I've never heard that out loud, I guess is the better way to put it, is to reveal truth, eternal and unfailing. It is not the props of exaggeration or distortion of our feeble words. The truth about abortion demands no inflammation or embellishment, which calling someone a murderer is not embellishment. That's not embellishment. It is inflammatory, and inflammatory is necessary. So she's wrong there as well. It does require inflammatory rhetoric. Inflammatory rhetoric is good. It's a good thing, especially in politics. The hurt abortion causes to women and children in society can be communicated in plain terms, like murder, right? For those who deny the reality of abortion, however, even the plain truth inflames. Like, again, she just undercut her own argument. Thus, we cannot ascribe inflammatory language alone attacks against abortion clinics. In fact, the violence perpetuated against abortion providers peaked, according to the figures reported by Narrow, in the 1990s before social media. It's entirely possible that the outlet social media provides for communicating dissent has helped lessen clinic violence. Nor can we apologize for speaking the plain truth in love. Indeed, there is no love absent truth. Still, human language has its limits. Humanity's brokenness is mirrored in the imperfection of our words, so often inept, ill-chosen, or misunderstood. Human speech, writes Gustav Flaubert, is like a cracked pot on which we beat out rhythms, forbears to distance when we are striving to make music that will wring tears from the stars, especially in situations as consequential as pregnancy, formed in crisis, a child to clothe and feed and love. It's important that we get our words as well as our actions as right as we possibly can, like murder. When human lives are at stake, our language must reach not the bears but the heavens. As we affirm the truth about abortion and a precious human life, we cannot do or support wrong words or wrong deeds to achieve right. We are to pursue God's good in God's way. And this actually circles back to, again, her original stance on hating shortcuts. So, again, she opposed the stuff that allowed this to happen because to her, in her own self-righteousness, it is the wrong deeds in the wrong way and the wrong words were used. And it's just pride. That's what this is. This is pride. And there's really not much else to read here. Again, this is Karen Swallow Pryor. We're talking about the worst pro-life activist in the history of pro-life activism. Change my mind if you can come up with a worse one. I mean, I know people like to criticize Abby Johnson, but she's not nearly as bad as Karen Swallow Pryor. It's not even close. So that's really all I got to say about that. If you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. And, again, these types of videos don't get very monetized on YouTube, so definitely head on over to evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. You can become a Patreon-like subscriber there on our own subscription service that we built. And support Christian commentary that will call out the wolves like Karen Swallow Pryor and more. More on this developing story as it goes on. Have a blessed day, and I will catch you on the next one.